Hello and welcome. Today, we're going to be looking at a completely different way of understanding our own minds. It's a framework called structural cognition. And, let's just dive right in because this might honestly change the kinds of questions you ask yourself every single day.
So think about it. Whenever we learn something new about ourselves, maybe it's a personality type or a habit or some tendency we have, this is almost always the first question that just pops into our heads. Okay, great. Now, what do I do about it? And, that first question, it pretty quickly spirals into others. We start to wonder, why do I keep doing this? Seriously, why am I like this? We're digging and digging for a reason, right? An explanation we can use to fix what we think is a problem.
And before you know it, we've landed right here. This whole line of questioning, it isn't just about seeking understanding anymore. It adds this heavy layer of self-evaluation, of judgment. It creates this internal conflict and, honestly, a whole lot of extra cognitive load.
Okay, so what's really fascinating here is what this instinct of ours reveals. These questions show that we're operating from this really deep-seated assumption about what self-knowledge is even for. We believe its entire purpose is to give us an action plan.
Let's just give this a name. We'll call it the behavior first assumption. It's this idea that understanding is just a tool we use to produce a specific action, or, a change in our behavior. But what if that whole assumption is fundamentally flawed? See, structural cognition operates on a completely different premise. So this behavior first mindset, it sends us on this constant hunt for tools. We're always looking for methods, strategies, techniques, quick fixes, anything we think can solve the problem of ourselves. And this slide just illustrates the shift perfectly. So the old model, it sees understanding as just a tool to get an action. But the structural perspective, it flips that completely on its head. Here, understanding isn't the tool, it's the primary goal. It's all about clearly seeing your own cognitive architecture, the fundamental how of your thinking, before you even think about taking any action.
So if it's not another tool to add to our collection, what is it? Well, I want you to think of structural cognition not as a new way of doing anything, but as a new way of seeing.
So officially, structural cognition is a descriptive framework. What that means is it takes things like resistance or motivation and it moves them out of the realm of morality, that whole am I lazy, am I broken cycle, and puts them into the structural domain. It simply explains how your mind operates, especially under pressure. Think of it like a blueprint for a house's electrical wiring. It's not about judging the electricity as good or bad. It's about understanding how it's routed and what happens when too many appliances are running at once. Let's just let that sink in for a second. It is not a tool. It is a lens. A tool is for fixing something you think is broken. A lens is simply for seeing more clearly. It doesn't act on the world. It just changes what's visible to you. Let's really break that down. A tool implies there's a problem, and you, the user, you need to fix it. But a lens just changes your view. And here's the magic of it. Once your cognitive structure becomes visible to you, your behavior suddenly starts to explain itself. The confusion that made you go looking for a tool in the first place, it just kind of dissolves. Okay, so what actually happens when you start seeing your own cognitive wiring clearly? Well, the effects are profound, but they're indirect, they're architectural. It's not about forcing change. It's about what changes naturally when the system is no longer misunderstood. This whole approach is purely about explanation, not intervention. It is not about interrupting your patterns or challenging your beliefs. Instead, the change happens because your system simply stops fighting its own lawful, natural responses. That internal conflict just goes way, way down. And this ripple effect, it happens in these really clear stages. So first, you begin to see your cognitive structure clearly. That leads directly to the second step. The misinterpretation just ends. That what's wrong with me question, it just fades away. And third, this dramatically reduces your cognitive load because you're no longer wasting all that energy on internal conflict. And finally, with less load and less fighting, your behavior starts to change. Indirectly, without you ever having to force it. So what old models does this new lens replace? Well, it replaces the idea that your behavior is the root cause of your problems. It moves past those simple explanations based on motivation or discipline, and this is huge. It removes the moral judgment from your struggles. It's not about finding a better belief. It's about seeing a completely different causal layer. Now, it's also really important to be clear about what this doesn't replace.
This is not a substitute for therapy or education or learning new skills. You can think of it as the architectural foundation. All of those other really important domains, they operate downstream from this structural layer.
And that leads to a final, crucial distinction. Learning this isn't the work. It's the stable ground that all future work stands on. It's a fundamental and permanent shift in your orientation to yourself. And once this lens stabilizes, the way you relate to yourself just quietly transforms. Behavior isn't good or bad, it's just structural. Difficulty isn't a personal failure, it's contextual. Pressure becomes depersonalized, and those moments of collapse are no longer a mystery. They're understood. You start to see the coherence in it all. Ultimately, the effect is this. The system, your mind, it stops arguing with the reality of how it functions. And when that happens, there's just less friction, less confusion, and a softening of that constant, urgent need to fix yourself. So we end right where we began, but with a totally different question. We started by asking, what do I do? But with this new lens, the question that truly matters becomes so much more powerful and way more profound. What can I see?